The following program contains mature subject matter. Listener discretion is advised. Montreal's news talk leader, CJAD 800 presents Passion with sex therapist Dr. Laurie Betito. To reach Dr. Laurie, call 514-790-0991. Star Talk, a free call on Bell Mobility, and 800-491-CJAD. Now, here's Dr. Laurie.
Welcome to Passion, a show all about love, sex, and relationships. I'm Dr. Laurie Betito, clinical psychologist and sex therapist. We open up the lines for you to call in if you've got questions about sex, love, relationships. You can call in tonight. Our regular monthly feature. We call it Dating Dilemmas because we talk about the dilemmas that people experience in the dating world. And joining me, as he does every month, is Frank Kermit of franktalks.com. He's the author of a number of books and educational DVDs on the subject of dating, many different aspects. So if you are single, you have questions about dating, you need a little coaching, this is the way to go. You can give us a call at 514-790-0991. You can text your message or your comment or your question or whatever at 514-800. And if you're calling long distance, 1-800-491-CJAD. Usually, Frank and I decide, we talk ahead of time. We think, okay, let's pick a dilemma. Let's pick something that is people have trouble with in the dating world. And today we're going to talk about people who have trouble with attachment. So either people who attach too easily, too much, people who struggle to feel attached, or some people who they want to, but they can't. They can't feel that emotional attachment. And I'll talk about Dexter. I don't know if you're a fan of Dexter. I'm a new fan. I've only finished season 1, but we'll talk about that. And also people who feel suffocated in relationships, because that's also related to the way we attach. And believe it or not, this is all related to our history. Right, Frank?
Exactly. Everything comes down to what's called attachment history, where you first learned to feel a sense of attachment with your primary caregivers, usually the parent, but if the parent wasn't there, a nanny, a guardian, and how that parent figure addressed a child's emotional needs when the child was distressed. Was the parent there? Was the parent giving?
Right.
Now, the child, of course, for purposes of survival, will stay in a very close proximity to the caregiver, even if the caregiver is not emotionally giving. And that might start a pattern of behaviors where, as an adult, they may stay in very emotionally unsatisfying relationships, or they simply will find ways to avoid getting into any sort of deep attachment.
Right.
But they'll still go through some of the motions.
What's interesting about attachment, and it's a theory that I love, it's a theory that I did my dissertation on, so I know a little bit about this too. And what's so fascinating is that whatever our attachment style, like however we attach as children, we tend to carry through into our adulthood, unless there's work that's done, like through therapy or what have you. So we tend to take that with us and create that in our relationships. And then also we tend to transfer that to our own children. So it's almost like, there's this whole lineage of attachment. So if there's trouble in childhood, it's important to deal with the issues so that you don't end up repeating these patterns.
And unfortunately, most people don't know that it is a problem until it's too late. Because that's the environment they grew up in. That's what they
That's
believe.
What's normal.
Exactly.
Right.
And when they already believe, well, this is just normal, a couple will always fight in a certain way. If that's what you grew up with, that is what you are going to repeat as a behavior pattern because it's the familiar. Right. And let's say you grew up in an emotionally unhealthy environment.
Which you wouldn't necessarily know it at the time.
Exactly.
Right.
But as an adult, you end up in what could be a potentially rewarding, a potentially emotionally healthy relationship, and it just doesn't feel right. Even though intellectually you're with the right person, the person is very good to you, the person treats you amazing, but there's just something that makes you want to run away.
Right.
Because it's not familiar.
Right.
And what people seem to try to figure out, at least when they make the decision to want to be in emotionally healthy relationships, that's when they say, well, I know this is not something that I'm drawn to, I don't respond to it, but I know that it would be better if I did. And that begins the process of change.
Right. And making decisions not just based on instinct or on what naturally drives us somewhere, which could be unhealthy.
Exactly.
Because what drives us is usually the familiar, and the familiar is not always the healthiest choice for us.
And sometimes what drives people is lust. They feel a certain sense of attraction, and they're physically attracted to someone who might not necessarily be good for them emotionally. But they get that sense of, oh, well, that's the person I should be with because I desire them, not realizing that who they're attracted to isn't necessarily who's the best partner for them.
Yeah, I think that's an important point. And I think in dating, these are things that we need to, be aware of, and also to question. If you have, if you've been in a pattern of, bad relationship after bad relationship, or dissatisfied continuously, or you choose the wrong guy or girl time and time again, and it always seems to be a similar pattern, it's time to look at this.
Exactly. One of the things I tell my clients is that if every relationship you've been in has been a bad relationship, there is a common element in every single one of those relationships.
Yeah, you.
You.
Exactly.
And it's only when I went through that process after I hit my rock bottom where I said, wow, I can't believe I failed at every single relationship I've been in. The one common element in all those relationships was me. It was time to look at myself and take responsibility for the choices that I've made.
Right. It's interesting how your own search for meaning led you down this path, Frank. You became a coach, helping others after helping yourself. I mean, who was out there to help you?
Very few people. You got to understand, I never envisioned this type of profession whatsoever.
Right.
I was on a very different career path. And I just went through this, and what I wanted was to figure out love. Once and for all, I wanted to figure out love. At the time, my goal was to get back my ex-fiancée.
Right.
And I just went on this spree of dating, quote unquote, as many people as I could just to learn what love is. And I was lucky enough to find a few mentors. But it took me 3 years of trial and error and experimentation and experimental learning.
It's not too bad, 3 years. Some people, it takes them a life, 15 years before they get to that point. So consider yourself lucky. 3 years ain't so bad.
Well, 3 years without any physical affection. And that was on the tail end of a 5-year dry spell.
Right. Oh, okay.
So
in other words, poor Frank was very needy at that point.
Very bad.
514-790-0991. If you have something to contribute to this program, would love to hear from you. Or if you have questions for Frank, if you need a little coaching with dating, we'd love to hear from you. If you feel that you become too easily attached or not attached enough, this may be your situation. This may be your dating dilemma. Let's hear from you at 514-790-0991. You're listening to Passion on CJAD 800.
From Loser to Seducer is the story of Frank B. Kermit. This book marks the triumph of a nice guy over most of his inner demons. This includes going from being a loser to managing 5 lovers at the same time, his first Valentine's date with 2 women at the same time, and getting back the one that got away. Want to learn how you can change your life? Buy this book at franktalks.com.
You're listening to Passion with Dr. Laurie Betito on Montreal's News Talk Leader, CJAD 800.
Tonight, it's our special monthly feature, Dating Dilemmas. Frank Kermit in studio. He's a dating coach and has written many books on the subject. You can check out all his works at franktalks.com. In fact, we are giving away one of his CD sets, 101 Great First Dates, conversation topics, what to say. So if you need a little help along the way, we'll just put your name into a draw and you just might win. 514-790-0991. One of the main topics we're talking about is attachment. People who have difficulty attaching to, getting emotionally involved, becoming vulnerable with somebody else, feeling safe in a relationship. All that is related to attachment and the way we attach to others. Either we could be too needy or not enough or too cold, or we can get accused of being all of those things. So sometimes we have to take a look at ourselves and say, okay, where does this come from, and how do I fix this to improve my chances? We have James on the line. Hi, James.
Hi.
Hi.
I had a question regarding getting attached to somebody, say on the first date, because I wonder if that's healthy or not. Because there's times I go on dates and I meet a really amazing girl, and we just end up not seeing each other again. And I'm just I made so many mistakes, but I keep thinking about these kind of girls. Is that a healthy thing?
Well, I think interestingly enough, I'll let Frank answer, but you're saying that you feel like you attach too quickly. I'm wondering what she's feeling. She's going, whoa, Nellie, this is going way too fast, and you might be scaring her. Is that something that's a possibility?
Sometimes I think that's a possibility, but usually it's not. Maybe it's just a little mistake I made. But it's just that feeling I get. Sometimes I make mistakes and. Like
what? What kinds of mistakes are you talking about?
Sometimes I guess everyone's different. So sometimes it could be too touchy. Sometimes you don't touch enough. That's the kind of thing. I say it's calibration.
First date, James. Just a note to self for you: no touching. I say, why do you have to touch on the first date? I don't see, you have to get to know the other person, how receptive they would be. Why don't you wait till she, kind of moves in towards you?
Okay.
Frank's saying no. We have different opinions about this, Frank. Okay, go ahead, Frank. I don't know. I'm not the dating guy, the dating coach here, so.
Hi, James. Thanks for calling. I would start off by saying that feeling an attachment for somebody is okay if the attachment is earned. If this girl has said something, or you have mutual things in common, if she proves to be a good potential partner for you, then it's okay to feel some sense of attachment.
After one date?
Well, my wife and I decided to get married after 26 hours together on our first date.
Wow.
So.
And they're still married.
And we're still married.
Right.
The issue for me, though, is does the other person feel they've earned the sense of attachment that you're expressing?
So you have to feel the reciprocation.
Exactly. You have to feel that you've earned it. Let's say when I went out on a date, if some girl really showed a lot of interest in me, and I felt that I really didn't do anything or say anything that would have merited that kind of attention, I would become suspicious.
And when you'd think what, for example?
I'd be thinking, why is she showering me with this much attention when I haven't done anything? Okay, what is she really after?
Right. And I could be anybody? In other words, would she do this to everybody?
Exactly.
Okay.
Now, with my experience with women is that when they're getting a lot of attention that they don't feel that they've genuinely earned, because she's wondering, well, why am I special to him? He's just really showing me lots of attention.
It might sound desperate.
Exactly.
Okay.
It can come off as desperation, neediness. Maybe he gives off the vibe that he's only after sex. That's not a bad thing, but if she wants something more and he's only going after sex, and she's not looking for that at that point, that's not going to work.
Right.
So you have to temper the attachment that you're expressing to the person with whether or not they've actually said or done something that has earned it. With me and my wife, I showed more and more interest in her, and she reciprocated as we got to know each other, and we had things in common, and we had the similar values. But if you're on a date and you're having a conversation and it turns out, well, we're really kind of different people, even though we sort of like each other, any sense of attachment you show at that point isn't really merited.
Right.
So
okay, that makes sense. That makes perfect sense. Thanks so much for your call, James. I hope that answers your question. Dating Dilemmas here on Passion.
Frank Talks is sponsored in part by Everything Out of Her Mouth is a Test, a man's guide to the emotional needs of women. Ladies, do you want the man in your life to understand you on your level? Do you want your man to be able to listen to and address all of your emotional needs? Show him how much you really want your relationship to be the best it can be. Everything Out of Her Mouth is a Test makes the perfect gift. The book, written by a man, for men, is endorsed by every woman that reads it. This book is a guide for men to understand exactly what a woman means when she speaks. Is that worth changing your life forever? Buy this book at franktalks.com now.
This is Passion with Dr. Laurie Betito on Montreal's News Talk Leader, CJAD 800.
Tonight it's dating dilemmas. Frank Kermit joins me from franktalks.com. We have some of his CDs to give away, 101 Great First Dates. So if you call in, you have a question for Frank, we will put you into a draw. We're talking about people who have difficulty attaching, and often very much related to, well, what happens to us in our early attachments to our primary caregivers. And interestingly, I was bringing this up with Frank earlier. I don't know if you're a fan of Dexter. I have now become like this diehard fan. I've only seen the first season, but I can't get enough of it. Like I'm watching episode after episode, and during the snowstorm, I stayed in bed the whole day watching. And that's so on me. And you know me, Frank. Right? Yeah, everybody who I told laughed their head off because I do not do nothing and sit and watch TV. I never watch TV anyway.
You're a workaholic. There's no way you would.
Okay, so, right. And I allowed myself that day. And I love this character. I love this character. And he's, for people who don't know, Dexter, I don't think he's a sociopath, but he's a killer. Anyway, people may argue with me, but he has trouble attaching. He evolves, he's got this relationship. He always does the right thing, or what he thinks, and you hear his internal dialogue throughout the show where he says, okay, I know I should be reacting to this. I know she looks like she needs a hug from me, but, and even with sex, everything feels so weird and awkward, and he's not connecting, and he says he's not connecting. And here's somebody who had, difficulty in childhood, like a traumatic childhood, and their attachment was broken at a very early age. And anyway, so it's all very much related to what we're talking about today. And I mean, that's an extreme case, what happened, that kind of trauma. But trauma in a person's life has that kind of impact also, potential impact.
It's funny you mentioned Dexter. I was thinking of the TV show Dr. Drew Sex Rehab. Mm-hmm. They had a celebrity on there who, as a child, one of his parents threw a hatchet at him as a child. And you would think this is an incredibly traumatic event. And he simply, brushed it off as something like, well, I'm sure I did something that,
merited it.
Mm-hmm. But when Dr. Drew asked him, well, would you do that to your own child? He turned around and said, absolutely not. So on some level, there is a recognition that what happened to him wasn't appropriate. And this is one of the red flags. This is one of the signs you're dealing with someone who may have attachment issues. When they describe traumatic events from their past and they brush it off. Or they even try to say, well, it made me a stronger person.
Right.
There's a way to, again, when bad things happen, you can always turn it around, learn from it, and yes, it can make you a better person. But if you don't still acknowledge that it was what it was, a traumatic event, then there's a disconnect there.
When people say, no big deal. It is a big deal. And even though you might have gotten over it, it is a big deal. More dating dilemmas after this.
Frank Talks is sponsored in part by The Eye of the Seductress, Volume 1, a workbook for women to learn about the emotional needs of men. This book is designed to teach women how to seduce men into making a commitment. By learning about the emotional needs of men, a woman will learn what makes even the most notorious players, pimps, and high-value men and quality male leaders commit to one particular woman. From the desk of Frank B. Kermit, the seduction relationship expert, this book is also a great resource for men to learn how to judge the value of a woman to know if she is worthy of everything he has to offer. The Eye of the Seductress. Buy this book now at franktalks.com.
Tonight, Dating Dilemmas. Once a month, we focus on dating issues. If you have an issue you want to discuss that has to do with dating, meeting people, how to be successful, all of that, then you can join us tonight at 514-790-0991. One of the things we're talking about is people who have trouble being attached, people who either attach too much or not enough. And what's interesting is that it's very much related to our early attachments to our caregivers. And it really, what it means is, what kind of relationship did we have with the people who were supposed to love us? And difficulties in those early relationships can lead us down a path where we have trouble trusting people, where we have excessive needs for attachment, where we appear very, very needy, where we have gives us a distortion. It distorts our perceptions of our partner, and we have trouble with vulnerability and intimacy. So all of this affects the way we date.
Exactly. And for those of us who have started having children, it's going to affect the way we parent.
Yeah.
And if getting your own love life in order is not motivation enough to deal with these particular demons, the idea that you don't want to pass on your demons to your children is a wonderful motivator for people who are just starting to realize it might be time to finally fix this.
Right. And also examine, we said this earlier about if you've had one lousy relationship after another, you got to start looking at yourself and maybe look at the dependency issues and how you related, what the complaints were of each of those people. One thing I've noticed when I see couples in therapy who have been previously married and are now going through another difficulty, or sometimes this is their third, marriage, and I'll always ask the question, tell me what your first, wife or husband complained of. Tell me what your second one complained of. And it's always the same thing. Mm-hmm. It's the same patterns keep coming back and coming back. You don't just change that by changing partners.
Exactly. You have to look within and realize what you're doing to help manifest this particular problem. And you would also have to look at things like, do you go after people who are emotionally unavailable? Mm-hmm. A certain percentage of my client base are guys who are madly in love with women who aren't interested in them. And the more the woman rejects him, the more he feels for her.
Now, where does that come from in terms of childhood? What kinds of backgrounds did these guys have?
In most cases, they grew up in very emotionally sterile environments where they learned that to show love and not receive love back is the norm.
Okay.
And because they're dealing with their primary caregivers, let's say they're fixating on their mother. Mm-hmm. I know this is very stereotypical.
Well, okay, but most often that's what it is. The mother figure is the primary caregiver.
Right. So let's see. The guy shows affection to his mother. His mother does not return any affection as a mother would typically be expected to.
Right.
He still needs to be in her proximity for his own survival as a child.
Right.
So he develops this pattern that, this is what love must be. This is how he's going to interpret love. So he gets into the dating world. He meets a woman that thinks he's wonderful, and she's ready to commit to him, and she's ready to be with him. She's ready to show him how much she values him, and he'll be turned off. He won't know why, because it's so unfamiliar. But he'll ask out a woman, and she says, no, thanks, I don't see it working out. And he'll respond, is probably the best word.
Right.
He responds to that by feeling even more attachment. He responds to that by responding to being rejected, because that's how he interprets love. So then he starts to build up, well, if she's rejecting me like this, and this is how I interpret love, I don't know why, but I feel like I should keep asking her out.
And is this the guy that becomes the stalker?
This is the guy who becomes the creepy, lonely guy who basically is a good guy, but can't figure out what he's doing wrong and he's unable to
push away all these women.
Exactly. Here's the ironic part. In those situations where, let's say, he's friends with a girl for many, many years, and at some point she turns around and says, you know what? I'm willing to give you a chance. Why don't we go out on a date? At that moment, something triggers in him, and he can't figure out why, but as soon as she starts to show any sort of affection, he'll turn off.
He moves away.
Exactly. And you'd also see this with women who habitually date married men. They go after men who are emotionally unavailable, but the minute that man becomes
available,
he is going through a divorce, she can't explain why, but she just doesn't want to be with him anymore. And this is all related to the fact that these are all attachment issues.
And interestingly, all of this, what's our job here tonight? Our job is to bring to consciousness things that might be going on at an unconscious level. We're talking about this in a very open manner, but the reality is that most people are not aware that this is the process going on in their brains.
Absolutely. And to bring up what their attachment history is when they look at issues with their parents, you're dealing with a lot of shame and guilt and things that they've never told anyone. From what I've studied, I'm doing an advanced certificate in trauma counseling, and everything that the research suggests is that these particular issues don't even come up in therapy until much later on,
right,
until there's a better relationship of trust between the therapist and the patient.
Right.
So you're talking about something that they may not be ready to deal with because they spent so much of their life glossing over whatever that incident was that gave them the attachment issue to begin with.
And I can tell you that often these traumas, early childhood traumas, don't surface until there's a major issue in a couple, and then suddenly the whole past comes up, and we look at it and say, aha. So now, and they had never seen it as related before to their relationship or the troubles they were having in that relationship. 514-790-0991. Would love to hear from people who have felt like they either had trouble, getting attached or feeling too attached to people, or felt like they, couldn't get it quite right. Maybe we can help. If you want a little bit of coaching from Frank, you can get it right here, and from me as well. 514-790-0991. You're listening to Passion on CJAD 800.
Frank Talks is sponsored in part by the Adult Male Virgin Seminars and Telephone Consultations. If you are an adult and want to get a handle on this once and for all, you need this seminar. Being an adult male virgin can be most stigmatizing in today's society. You feel like a failure in the eyes of the mass culture around you, alienated from your male friends who all talk about their sexual conquests, and you must hide this shameful secret lest they use it against you. And the very personal pain, anguish, and despair that cannot be described by words that haunts you every moment of your life. Enough is enough. It is time for male virgins to take charge of their sex lives. Frank gives you the rules of winning in this seminar. The Adult Male Virgin Seminars and Telephone Consultations. Make your first time the best time of her life. Only available at franktalks.com. Frank helps adult boys turn into men.
This is Passion with Dr. Laurie Betito on Montreal's News Talk Leader, CJAD 800.
You're listening to Passion tonight, Dating Dilemmas. Frank Kermit in studio. He's a dating coach, has worked as a seduction coach as well, but also he, has specialties in trauma and anything, all this stuff he can talk about. And one of the things that we've been talking about is the way we relate to people, and how and why that gives us or poses a dilemma, a difficulty in dating. And it has to do with our early relationships, not not romantic relationships, but our early love relationships. So, and this has a lot to do with who we are in the dating world. Let's talk about, for example, Frank, you've been coaching guys for a very long time, and you've met a lot. And so I think you may be able to give us insight into, the typical maybe background, if there is such a thing, but you can tell us that. But there are some men who don't even make the effort, right, to approach women, to date women. These are often the regular customers maybe of sex workers or what have you. They have a real difficulty socializing with women. What's that about?
You generally start off with a guy who's very, very shy. Okay. And this is where, that's one of the first symptoms. They're incredibly shy. They're incredibly introverted. They don't really know how to talk. They don't really know how to be social. And rejection for a guy like that, it affects him on such a deep level. He spends so much time building up what could be when he likes a girl. Oh, I like Susie down the hall. And I would really like to ask her out. And he starts painting this incredible image, this future of what life would be like with Susie, so that when he finally does ask Susie out and she says, nah, I really don't think it would work out, he's not only mourning the fact that he just got rejected, but this whole life that he built for himself has now been shattered.
Now, is that someone who tends to live more in a fantasy world, or?
Generally not. I mean, in other aspects of his life, he's going to be very successful. He understands to adhere to the rules of reality. In his career, he's going to find a job that's going to be something that he knows how to do well. He's very proficient. But when it comes to relationships, there's that variable where they don't have control over the other person.
It sounds, I don't know if it's control, but to me, when I'm listening to you talk, I'm hearing people who have this problem in the social realm possibly being on the autism spectrum as well. We had a call once of a young guy who actually told us, he says, I have Asperger's, and this is the area that I have the most difficulty. I don't know where to begin. I don't know what to do when I'm interested. Everybody else, and this is a common trait among Asperger's and people who are on the spectrum.
I am a very new student when it comes to Asperger's syndrome, and it's only in recently learning about it and trying to understand what the signs are, what is part of this syndrome, that I'm starting to realize just how many of my clientele may have been on this spectrum.
I am so sure. And, like you, it's only in the recent years that I really started to look into it as well and have noticed that a large base of my, the couples that come in to see me as well, often one person will seem to have traits of this, and it's not their fault. It's not like, and it creates issues in the relationship and problems in the relationship with zero understanding between the two of what the hell's going on.
Well, in most cases, most people who are on this spectrum don't even know that they're on this spectrum.
Well, that's right. Mm-hmm. Especially as adults, unless you were diagnosed as a kid. Angie joins us on Passion. Hi, Angie.
Hi, how are you?
Good, how are you?
Very interesting topic. I love it. Good show. Okay, so my mind is filled with so many different questions, but what I want to ask you guys is the following. What about when someone gets married at a young age, let's say in their early 20s, it fails, and then they have girlfriends or boyfriends throughout the next 10, 15 years, what have you, but they can't commit again. I like what you were saying before about people marrying once, twice, three times and repeating the same mistakes. But this is from the opposite side of the spectrum, whereas they will not settle down again. I mean, maybe
they're afraid. I think it's the once bitten, twice shy syndrome here. For some people, that's what it is. It's a turn off of marriage altogether, maybe because they were traumatized by the divorce.
Okay, so they're associating then all these characteristics or all these things that were going on in the relationship, they kind of apply them to the next girl and the next girl and so on.
And you have to be careful, actually, that you don't make you don't make them make others pay the price of what happened in the first relationship. I think that's something that people do. It's like, a woman might go out with one guy who, slapped her around, and suddenly all guys are potential, animals. And so she avoids, and so and that's or she puts the new guys through such a ringer, even though they are not the least bit like that, by pushing them away, by testing their limits, by pushing them to the edge to see if they will behave in the same way, and then the person gets fed up and says, "Listen, I can't take this anymore."
Right.
If you can't trust me and if you can't believe that I'm going to love you, and if you don't let me love you, I'm out of here.
Right. Or maybe in a deeper sense, also maybe they hooked up with this person initially because it was the right thing to do, but
that's what Frank was saying.
As well.
Exactly. Yeah. And they don't respond. See, they responded better to the person who wasn't being so good to them because it might have been something they were used to, and they knew intellectually it's not healthy, obviously, but somehow they're drawn to that. And the person who isn't like that, they might sabotage. That might be actually a part of it. Yeah.
One of the things that when I work with my clientele, and if they've gone through a bad experience, if they're coming out of a divorce, I've often asked them the question, is it that you don't trust other people in general, or is it that you don't trust your own judgment? And when we get into, do you trust your judgment of character? Do you trust that you're going to make a better choice next time? And I get them to focus on the things that they can control, and this is for both men and women. If you can trust your own judgment and learn from the mistakes you've made and at least be aware of what you did wrong in the past, and you've set up new behavior patterns so you don't repeat those mistakes. Can you trust yourself to choose a better partner next time? And if the answer is yes, I can trust myself, you're going to find people are much more open to taking the chance.
Right.
But when someone is flat out saying, that's it, I am never doing this again, what that communicates to me is that they don't trust themselves to make a better choice.
Right, and in that case, if you answer yes, I don't trust myself, then it's time to get help to figure it out. Absolutely.
Life's so uncomplicated, isn't it?
It can be. It can be because listen, our backgrounds and and such. Angie, we're putting your name into a draw for the CD. Okay?
Oh, you're so sweet. Thanks.
All right, I'm putting you on hold, so don't hang up. All right, bye-bye now. You're listening to Dating Dilemmas here on Passion on CJAD.
Frank Talks is sponsored in part by the Adult Male Virgin Seminars and Telephone Consultations. If you are an adult and want to get a handle on this once and for all, you need this seminar. Being an adult male virgin can be most stigmatizing in today's society. You feel like a failure in the eyes of the mass culture around you, alienated from your male friends who all talk about their sexual conquests, and you must hide this shameful secret lest they use it against you. And the very personal pain, anguish, and despair that cannot be described by words that haunts you every moment of your life. Enough is enough. It is time for male virgins to take charge of their sex lives. Frank gives you the rules of winning in this seminar. The Adult Male Virgin Seminars and Telephone Consultations. Make your first time the best time of her life. Only available at franktalks.com. Frank helps adult boys turn into men.
You're listening to Passion with Dr. Laurie Betito on Montreal's News Talk Leader, CJAD 800.
Dating Dilemmas tonight on Passion. 514-790-0991. Frank Kermit in studio. Hi, Abigail. Welcome to the program.
Hi, good
Hi.
night. How are you?
Good. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you.
Good. What do you want to say?
Okay, I'm calling concerning the dilemma and trust and all that.
Yeah.
Okay, it's pretty interesting. I'm always listening to this show,
Thank you.
And I'm learning a lot. And I said and we were talking the last time about trusting and bringing over from the next relationship to the other.
Right.
And I said to myself, maybe I did that sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, I did in the past, but now I'm learning.
Good.
Yeah. And it brings me to the next thing I want to say, that I myself can relate to bad dates and trust and bringing stuff over from the next one. I had a bad broken engagement, which traumatized me so much because I was left with a 6-month-old baby.
Oh, no. Yeesh.
And every time it's winter, I hate winter because they happen around this time.
Right.
But I have to live with it,
Yeah.
So the thing, my son, thank God, he's 7 now, so I'm okay. But it took me a while to really get over everything. And I thought all men were brutal.
It's traumatic. That's exactly it. That all men will leave me like this man left me. And can I ask you a couple of questions about your childhood?
Yeah.
How was your relationship to your parents? Did you have a father that was present? Did you...
No, my father was present until I was 5 years old.
And then he left?
And then he left.
Did he disappear altogether?
He left, he never came back.
Okay, so, very much related often to abandonment or early in childhood. So your message, even though at 5 you didn't quite get it, you felt abandoned. You have that feeling like, where's my daddy? Daddy's gone. He doesn't come back. And so that's already been in your head. Men will leave. Men will not come back.
Okay.
And you ended up somehow repeating that pattern by choosing a man who would do just that to you, because somehow some of those same things just felt... They felt natural or
familiar.
Or familiar to you. Doesn't mean they felt good, just familiar.
Oh, okay.
So you need to work out for yourself some of those early traumas and how you felt, so that you don't get yourself into relationships with unavailable people.
Yes, it is, because I couldn't understand it. I said that we were living together. There was supposed to be a marriage, and all of a sudden it just went haywire, and I'm like,
He dumped you. He just dropped you.
Yeah,
He abandoned you. He
give me a child.
And he abandoned you and your child. And so, of course, it's going to wake up feelings in you from your own early childhood and your own abandonment.
One of the things that I think we should also be aware of, people with attachment issues usually get into relationships with people with attachment issues.
Right.
Because that's what they're familiar, that's what they're drawn to.
Okay.
It's not an intellectual thing. You don't decide that you're going to have feelings for someone who can potentially abandon you. That's what you're familiar with. So the same type of mechanism that would attract you to a person like that is going to be in him as well. He's going to be attracted to someone who has gone through this as well.
Yeah. Does that make sense, Abigail?
Yes, I see the logic, and it's really something to think about.
Oh, yeah. Abigail, we're going to give you also one of Frank's CD sets, 101 Great First Dates, Conversation Topics, What to Say, all right?
Okay.
I'm going to put you on hold, so don't hang up.
Okay.
All right, thanks for your call. Boy, the time goes fast when we're together here, Frank. I appreciate it.
Very much so. I just love the free flow.
Yes, and we'll catch up with you again in the new year in January. Can't believe it's been a whole year since we've been doing this together. That's fantastic. Thank you very much. I'd like to thank Mike Babbins in Master Control. Thank you. And if you need to reach me, passion@CJAD.com. We just got a text message. Can you talk about this again? So somebody wants us to mention this again. Well, you know what? In the next few dating dilemmas, it can certainly come up again and again. It's a huge topic. So have a good night, everybody. News is next, and then stay tuned for some great comedy with your host, Joey Elias. And please don't forget life is short, so make sure you do take the time to smell the flowers and indulge your passions.
Frank Talks is sponsored in part by the Adult Male Virgin Seminars and Telephone Consultations. If you are an adult and want to get a handle on this once and for all, you need this seminar. Being an adult male virgin can be most stigmatizing in today's society. You feel like a failure in the eyes of the mass culture around you, alienated from your male friends who all talk about their sexual conquests, and you must hide this shameful secret lest they use it against you. And the very personal pain, anguish, and despair that cannot be described by words that haunts you every moment of your life. Enough is enough. It is time for male virgins to take charge of their sex lives. Frank gives you the rules of winning in this seminar. The Adult Male Virgin Seminars and Telephone Consultations. Make your first time the best time of her life. Only available at franktalks.com. Frank helps adult boys turn into men.